All right, welcome everyone as we enter week 4 of the MCIC series. As a reminder, the MCIC series is a virtual conference series offered throughout the month of March. This series is hosted by the Department of Campus Climate. Although we have had a lot of other partnership that has helped us get to this place and continues to work with us throughout the month. I shared with some others this morning, but as of this morning, we have 545 folks registered for the conference, which is an amazing amount. And so I just want to thank you all for being here today and continuing to support us in whatever ways you can. Caden will soon link our community standards in the chat. We do expect folks to read and abide by these standards today and through all of the sessions offered through the MCIC conference series. At this time, I would like to ask folks to please mute your microphone when you aren't speaking. This just helps reduce background noise and is also respectful for our presenters. There is closed captioning available for all of the sessions during the MCIC series. You should be seeing closed captioning at this time at the bottom of your screen in a dark gray box. If you do not, please try clicking the CC button at the bottom of your screen, which is also perhaps located under the More button. And you're looking for the option that says View Live Transcript. If you have any difficulties viewing the closed captioning or have any other questions, please message Caden or myself in the Zoom chat. I would also like to remind folks that most of the sessions during the MCIC series will be recorded, and this session now is being recorded. This is being done to make sessions as accessible as possible for those who cannot attend live and for those outside of the UW-Platteville institution. This session and all others will be available up to 3 business days after the live session occurs, and you can find them on our Campus Climate YouTube channel as well as our SharePoint site. If you have questions, comments, or concerns today or at any time during the MCIC series, please reach out to us either now via the Zoom chat, publicly or privately, or email us at campusclimate@uwplatt.edu. We do have folks monitoring that email throughout this session as well. And now I would like to introduce the presentation for today. And we have many representatives from the MAC group, or Men Advocating for Change. So the newly formed Men Advocating for Change MAC group has been meeting since the beginning of the academic year. This presentation will briefly discuss the origins of how the group came to fruition, as well as provide a panel of members who will share why they chose to be involved. There will also be an opportunity to learn how to become involved in the group and engage in the work done. This session is hosted by Jason Artz, Melissa Stoner, and Adam Iserman. I am first going to turn things over to Jason Artz.
All right, welcome everyone. We're glad that you decided to take some time today to learn more about how men are advocating for change on the UW-Platteville campus. So just to kind of give you a run through in terms of what our group is hoping to cover today. First, after this introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Melissa Stoner, and she's going to go through some background of how MAC was formed, kind of what were some of the driving forces around that. She's also going to share some campus survey data that also kind of was a how do you say it, kind of helped jumpstart the group as well. After that, we'll show a brief video introducing some of the members of MAC. The video was created by our wonderful Russ Hill, who's Media Tech Services. So we really appreciated all of the work that he did in helping us put that video together. He also participated in some of the open discussions, the open campus discussions. So we really appreciate all of that. And then after the video, we have a few members in attendance here today that will quickly or briefly just go through, introduce themselves, talk about how they got involved in the group. And after that, we will open it up for an audience Q&A. At that point, we're hoping that everyone in the audience can ask some questions about our group, wanting to know a little bit more information. So maybe up until that point, just kind of be thinking of some questions or some other additional information that you might want to learn about our group. And then to close things out will be Adam Iserman, and he'll be kind of asking the crowd, getting some feedback from the crowd in terms of some theme ideas for our group next year, talk a little bit about the nomination process, and just finish with any closing thoughts. And then if you do have questions or anything, feel free to also post in the chat, and we will get to those as well. So now I will turn it over to Melissa Stoner, and she will be going through, again, the background of how our group was created, and then also sharing some campus statistics from surveys that also prompted us forming this group.
Thanks, Jason. So hi, everyone. I'm Melissa Stoner, and I'm the Prevention and Education Coordinator on campus, and one of the founding members of MAC. And essentially what Men Advocating for Change is all about is addressing the idea that men can, and often can play a very important role in preventing sexual violence, and also how men can promote social norms regarding healthy masculinity. Honestly, Men Advocating for Change kind of started out with a conversation. When I first started this job about 2 years ago, Jason approached me about how do we get more men involved on this campus, and then Adam and Caden were quickly pulled into those conversations. And yeah, it was just a lot of conversations, a lot of research, a lot of benchmarking, and ultimately something that really drove the creation of what we have now is the idea that throughout the literature, from the CDC through the Obama era's White House recommendations, men need to be a part of preventing sexual violence. And oftentimes the literature tells us that they can play a significant role when they serve as allies who are promoting social norms, who are changing the local culture, who can teach and learn their own skills that will prevent future perpetration. So the next question that we had to ask ourselves was, is there a need for this type of programming to exist on our own campus? And to answer that question, we really looked at the Educational Advisory Board's sexual violence survey. We have completed this survey as a university twice now. The last time we completed it was during the spring of 2018, and that is where this data is from. So just a little bit of background information about the survey. In terms of people who actually responded to the survey, a majority of our survey participants did identify as white and heterosexual, and around 50% or so of those people were women. But in terms of respondents by class level, it was pretty consistent. So that was really good to see. So from that survey, we learned that 65% of our participants had experienced at least one form of sexual harassment during that academic year. What you see now on the screen are some of the less common experiences of sexual harassment. Oftentimes, the most common forms of sexual harassment that the students experienced were either someone making inappropriate comments about your body or someone else's body in your presence, and also someone making sexist remarks or jokes in your presence. And we also asked students, where are these things happening? You know, when and where is sexual harassment occurring? So honestly, what we learned is that sexual harassment can and does happen anywhere. When it came to sexist remarks and jokes occurring, students experience that most often in a social setting at school. And that wasn't defined too much further. So that could be a residence hall common area. That could be a place where students congregate, like a dining area or the student center. But students were also experiencing this form of harassment, you know, in the classroom or in work settings. So it's important to remember that harassment is happening in a lot of different places. We also asked students about different types of sexual violence that they may have experienced. These are all the different acts of sexual violence that we specifically asked students about within the survey. And we learned that 13% of our participants had experienced at least one form of sexual violence since the beginning of that academic year. So again, the 2017-2018 academic year. UW-Platteville students actually reported higher rates of sexual violence in 2017-2018 compared to the national average for the Educational Advisory Board survey. During that same year, we actually participated in another survey called the National Collegiate Health Assessment. And those same findings were reiterated within that survey. So when we were asking students, female students, about reporting non-consensual sexual experiences, UW-Platteville, on average, experienced higher rates of touching, penetration attempts, and penetration compared to other UW system schools, and also, again, nationally. And just like sexual harassment, we learned that sexual violence experiences happened in a lot of different places. Most often, it occurred at an off-campus residence, but it also happened on campus, and it also happened, you know, downtown. What was really compelling for us to find was that the longer a student was on campus, the more likely they were to believe that sexual violence was a problem for our campus. With 62% of our fourth year students saying, yes, it's either somewhat or definitely an issue. And then we started to see a difference between how people answered by gender. So we learned that 56% of our female respondents thought that sexual misconduct was either definitely or somewhat of an issue on our campus. We also learned that engaging men as allies might be a really big challenge. So that year, the 2017-2018 year, men actually had increased their likeliness of thinking that sexual violence was not a problem at our school. So again, the gap had increased, and we don't necessarily know why, but we became very concerned because if I don't think something is a problem, am I very likely to engage in the content? You know, am I going to actively seek out bystander intervention training? Am I going to talk to this issue with my friends? Probably not if I don't think it's an issue. We also learned that a greater percentage of male respondents either agreed or strongly agreed with stated rape myths about sexual misconduct, about a bunch of different acts of sexual misconduct. We learned that 63% of our male respondents believed that rape and sexual assault could happen unintentionally, especially if alcohol was involved. We learned that 48% believe that if a woman hooks up with a lot of men, eventually she's going to get into trouble. And lastly, we learned that 33% of our male respondents believed that sexual violence and rape happen because men can get carried away in sexual situations once they've started. And all of these are really, really problematic to believe. So for us, we determined that yes, there was a need for an organization on our campus to be addressing how men get involved in sexual violence prevention, and also how do men think about sexual violence? How do men think about masculinity and manhood? And that is how we came up with Men Advocating for Change. Men Advocating for Change provides training opportunities to male identified folks on our campus. We also have our champions cohort, and we ask that our cohort members are willing to serve as role models, but they also have to have a commitment to learning more and doing deep dive discussions. So every year we've decided that we would like our cohort to kind of have a general theme. And this past year, our theme was, what is your one thing? And the question is, what is one thing that you can do to address sexual violence? And we actually did a poster series campaign earlier this year. And it was really great to hear some of our answers from our cohort this year. So these are all of the members of our very first MAC cohort. Pretty good group. So that is all I have. Jason, you can take it back away.
All right, thanks, Melissa. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and load up the video that some of our MAC members participated in. And again, Russ Hill helped put it all together for us. So I will get that going here really quick. All right. Can people hear any sound right now?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So the organization is called Men Advocating for Change, and with MAC, in my position as an educator, to provide information for students and be able to be a part of an organization and help with promoting more of understanding of sexual violence, of sexual assault, of hypermasculinity to men on the campus, so we can try to change the climate here to make it more open for everyone.
I think Men Advocating for Change for me is it's a place where I've been able to spend some time with other men specifically, thinking about and talking about ways that we can better speak out against domestic violence and violence against women. first and foremost, that's kind of what it's been about.
Men advocating for change is really trying to shift the focus of like domestic violence or what are considered like women's rights issues from being considered women's issue to more of they're also men's issues, and where men are taking accountability and men are stepping up to help facilitate that change.
I think providing the space and having that opportunity for a group of men to come together and really have, work on being vulnerable and really having some deep discussion about, okay, what do we need to do? What responsibilities do we have? What is going to be helpful in terms of working towards change?
There's oftentimes a sense that men don't understand the existence of patriarchy, of sexism, because we don't live it ourselves. We're not the victims of it. So therefore, getting men to understand that our actions have a result in the society and what we can do to change that. I think that's the key step of bringing awareness to our society to make sure that we have a more just society.
I think one of the main reasons that we need a place like this is because it's something that I think a lot of us, I'll speak for myself of course, is just we don't know how to speak very thoughtfully about some of these issues, and when you're in that position, it's pretty easy to make mistakes. It's pretty easy to sometimes not know the right language, say the wrong things, and this is kind of a place where I think we can bear ourselves a little bit more easily to speak about issues that we care about, but don't quite have the language yet to do it effectively.
It's important for men to support men because men have an understanding of the psychological and the cultural pressures of masculinity because we have to live that, right? So what defines a man? And oftentimes that definition, because we're in a male-dominated society, that men define that idea of masculinity. Men also define define what femininity is also, because we live in a patriarchal society that controls women as well.
With my experiences, that specifically for men, there's not always that opportunity where they have that chance to get together and be vulnerable and make connections in that way. And I think that vulnerability piece is huge because, again, in our society, it seems like sometimes vulnerability is viewed as a weakness. And for me, just in my work in mental health in general, when I'm working with people, one of the things that I stress is really kind of changing that narrative of vulnerability being a weakness to vulnerability really being a strength and an important piece of the work that we have to do.
But I think for us as men, we need to say, hey, this is what you're doing wrong, and calling men out and saying that you can't do this in a society that's supposed to be just and fair and understanding of the plight of other communities.
What's needed for a change to happen is for those who are the ones advocating for change, they have to have patience and dedication. And the reason why that's important, because as the saying goes, change doesn't happen overnight.
I think change starts small, right? Change starts local. It starts as a couple people with an idea and then grows to a movement. I think top-down change can surely happen, but I don't know that how long-lasting it's going to be.
In terms of who I think should be involved in this group or join this group, I think, one thing would be is, just male-identified folks on campus looking for that space to make those connections and to have the conversations and do it in an environment where, you know, they feel like there's more support.
So don't think like, oh, well, you have to be a perfect saint to join the group, or you have to be a total feminist to join this group. Like, no, you don't. Like, you know, you can have those problems. You can even still have those feelings and all that stuff and join the group, because, you know, getting it out there, sharing those perspective. And even as us from the other side of it, if we can see you, you know, like, oh, you still have those things, those feelings, those behaviors. Well, why is that? So where is it in society that, you know, still allows for this to happen? Maybe that's another area that we can, you know, look to target and try to make change to happen. So any man, you know, can actually join this group, because we can learn from each other no matter where your position is on this whole spectrum for change.
We can have a society that is masculine, feminine, and other as well, but we just need to understand that when masculinity takes its stranglehold on the experiences of men and trying to put us in situations of perpetual violence, then this can lead to a lot of destruction that's taking place in our society and have taken place in our society for who knows how long, right? So we need to address masculinity in our society and understand the toxic aspect of it. There's ways in which, you know, men can channel their frustrations and aggressions in a way that's going to be more productive and better, and not necessarily perpetuating that violence in other folks.
All right, so now we'll move on to the next portion and have some of the members of the group that volunteered to be part of this panel take some time and introduce themselves and talk a little bit about why they chose to join this group, as well as talking a little bit more about their one thing and why they committed to choosing that one thing. So I'll just open it up to the guys, and you know, whoever wants to go first can start, and we'll just go around from there.
I can go ahead and go first, I suppose. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Rich Dianchand. I'm a faculty member in the biology department and in my 11th year now. And so I honestly, I mean, I got involved because Melissa sitting in your office is rather formidable, and it's hard to say no. No, she sent me an email initially, and it seemed like something I would be interested in. Obviously, I wanted to learn more, and she came to talk to me about it, and it was a good conversation. I got a little bit of a sense of who some of the other guys are that were getting involved with this, and then of course we went into a global pandemic, and things kind of got shut down a little bit, but for a while. But it was, I like the opportunity about being able to. It was an issue that I think about, but didn't. It's uncomfortable to talk about, and uncomfortable to know how to talk about it. And so it was nice to know that there were other guys that kind of had that idea on campus, and just the idea of getting together with them with some regularity to discuss these things and honestly learn more seemed like something that I was really that I could get behind. I think the one thing that I chose in one, I needed to choose something, so that kind of made me choose something. But the idea of speaking out against microaggressions, which is what I chose, it seemed manageable and something that I could attempt to do. I guess there's a pun there if I said it seemed like a small gesture, but it was something that I felt that I could do. But I think the best part about this whole group is that it's allowed me to learn more and learn about better ways to discuss the issues at play here.
I can go. Yeah, Rich said it right. You know, when Melissa gets in your office, you can't say no. That arm twisting is very powerful. But she made a compelling case. I really was shocked by the numbers. I thought we were better than this. I didn't, it wasn't on my radar. I mean, I knew we weren't, men weren't perfect, and we knew that there was still, some issues, but I didn't realize that it was getting worse and that it was just flying under the radar. And I needed to be, I knew I needed to be involved. And so I was thrilled. I was thrilled to be nominated when I saw the other people were on the list. And I was like, wow, this is going to be some great conversations. And they really were. And I can't tell the people who are interested in getting on this, you need to. I did more listening. It's really a great diverse group of people, and the more people that are in it will have even a greater diversity of people coming from different ages and different backgrounds, and we need that. I'm from Southwest Wisconsin, and so sometimes there isn't a lot of diversity, and we had those conversations too. There isn't a lot out here, so when you get the opportunity to get with a great group of people that are doing a great thing and raising awareness, there was no way I could not be involved with it. So I just want to encourage everybody that if you're even thinking about doing this, you should.
I'll go ahead and go next. My name is Mike Emmendorfer. I'm the head football coach here at the university. I've filled in as athletic director on 2 different occasions. Also been here for 22 years. That being said, the proudest title I have is being called dad. I have 2 awesome children that are in their 20s. I've been married for 32 years. I was raised by an all-female family. My 3 sisters and my mother. My father passed away, so I've had a strong female presence in my life. The why behind joining this group is on a personal end, being a great example to my 2 children, but also on a professional end, being a great example for our student athletes, representing on a yearly basis up to 150 student athletes each year that I'm overseeing. And I think that's what leadership is about. It's about being an example and also action. So it's one thing to talk about these topics. It's also important to be involved with it. So that's my why behind it.
So I'll go next, Frank King. So I was thinking about what Mike and Coach were saying, and it kind of reminded me of when I was younger and I was personifying components of hypermasculinity, being sexist, and how I got out of that. How did I grow out of that? So, for me, being a man when I was younger, I'm talking about 20, 25, 30 years ago, I was thinking that was trying to be about sexual conquest. It was about being not showing any type of weakness, not showing any type of emotion. And that was like the definition of what I was taught to be a man, and not necessarily by family members, but this is more of just my friend circles. And so I was getting very mixed ideas of what masculinity or what manhood was supposed to be about. And as I learned and as I grew, I had a better understanding, and I'm still a learning process, and trying to address issues of how I'm complicit to patriarchy also even today. And so I wanted to have a space to try to work with other individuals to try to let young men today in this world to understand the problems of patriarchy in our society, to understand masculinity and how we can navigate to be better people.
All right, thanks, guys. I'm trying to look into everyone here. I don't know if there's anyone else outside of the guys that spoke that want to say anything that has been involved with our group this year.
Jason, did you want Caden or I to add
Yeah,
on?
if you want to, go for it. Yeah.
I think kind of echoing what Rich said, that one of the big things for me was just to continue to learn and grow myself. And you know, working on campus at an institution of higher ed, and especially being a resident director in a residence hall. So we have a lot of impact, you know, that we can have. But it, you know, conversations around sexual violence, sexual assault, unhealthy masculinity, you know, these type of things, you didn't have a quiz or an exam in grade school that you studied for and aced, you know, to learn how to be a good man necessarily. So sometimes just the vocabulary, the language of how to have these conversations, especially with, you know, the students and the young adults that we have the chance to interact with and be that role model for, I think is important. And as Rich said, so being able to have a space where you can have that conversation and develop a little bit of a relationship too with some others from around campus. You know, I wouldn't normally on a regular basis get the chance to talk to Rich or Frank or a coach or Mike or Jason or Caden, but having that opportunity on a regular basis to have conversations and dive into some of these issues and concerns with our society and hypermasculinity and sexual violence and everything helps, I think, us grow not only as individuals, but then those professionals. I think we're all, not to speak on behalf of everyone, but I think to some extent, you know, we all want to better the lives of the students that we get to work with. I think that's a key component of working at an institution of higher ed. And I think this is just one of those great things and great opportunities that we've had. And yeah, like everyone said, having those conversations, being able to listen, hear different perspectives and be able to speak openly has been great.
Thank you, Adam. I'll jump in quick too. This group has been really important to me, just as someone who's really passionate about issues related to violence against women, sexual violence, and things of that nature. But also as a transgender man, this has been really crucial. I feel like I like to say that the first 22 years of my life, I was being trained to be a woman and just did really badly at it. It was just like not the right thing. But I think something that has always struck me is how we correct men and masculinity so hard in our society. There's so many things that, you know, it's just constantly, it feels like constantly steering men towards avenues of violence and just how incredibly problematic that is, right? And so I've had to do a lot of work just trying to understand what masculinity means to me and how I fit into that narrative. And at the same time, I think there is this myth that masculinity in and of itself is bad. You know, it seems like when we use the word masculinity, people are automatically assuming that we're talking about something negative, when in reality, no, masculinity isn't inherently bad, but we need to acknowledge that there are aspects of it that are toxic, and those are things that we need to address in this group. And I think my favorite part about this group has been hearing so many different perspectives, so many different people from different backgrounds, different stories coming forward, and then all of us at some given point having kind of an aha moment of like, oh crap, maybe I didn't handle that the best way, and maybe I should have done that differently. And then also taking concrete things back to our spheres of influence and how we can have further conversations to create effective change. And that's really what MAC is about, is just us learning from each other and then having that impact on our spheres of influence. You know, we can't expect to go into these things and expect for sexual violence on our campus to be over by tomorrow. That's just not how change works, unfortunately. But the hope of this group is to create something that's sustaining and that will have longevity to it, that will last beyond us, right? And hopefully impact student, staff, and faculty alike. So definitely a good group to be part of.
All right, yeah, thanks everyone. I can just go a little bit too as well. in terms of why I chose to really get involved and be one of the people that helped create this. It still stands out in my mind. I think it was maybe a couple years ago, we had a large campus forum to address some bias incidents that had been going on in campus. And I remember there was a couple students there, and in that they were male identified students. And I remember at least one, if not, some other ones had made a comment to the group that, they were really looking for a place to be able to talk about their concerns and to, be able to address some of this, and hearing that that students weren't feeling like there was a space on campus, again, kind of was that initial push for me to start to look at doing something, especially since our campus is a little bit different in terms of the demographic of, being more of a male populated campus versus female populated campus. And that also for me has been a big piece of it too. I think too, for me, I've gotten to a point in my own personal work where, hearing the responses of like, well, I'm not one of those guys, or, oh, why, kind of hearing more of those defensive responses. I was at a point when I was younger where, I was one of those guys that said, well, I'm not the problem. Like, I'm not doing anything. Why are you coming after me? And, that's been a big piece of my own personal work. And I've gotten to a point where, okay, that response, that defensiveness for me personally isn't working anymore. And I want to find a group of guys that, and reach out and find men that want to get past that defensive response or kind of that hands-off approach, and really want to get involved and have a space where we can learn and figure out how to do that. So really that was for me a big part of why I felt like this was something important that we needed to do on our campus. All right, before we move on, I just want to open it up, like if there was any other people that were involved in any of our open sessions, our open dialogue sessions, or part of the champions group that's in the crowd that wanted to say anything, feel free, and we can move on after that.
Jason, maybe I can say something.
Yeah, go for it, Irfan.
So I think for me, I learned a lot by joining this group, and from my personal point of view, I came from a family of 10 kids, with 8 of them male and 2 are female. So, and the first 6 of us are male, and the 7th is my sister, the elder one. So and then coming again from, that cultural background from Pakistan, right? Masculinity in some sense is associated with power, right? And when I came to States, I had thought it will be different dynamics here, but what I found, no, it is almost the same as in any other country, or Pakistan more specifically. So I think when people mention systematic racism, it comes to my mind that masculinity, power of that is also systematic in our culture, right? That we in day-to-day life as men probably don't think about certain things because we are men and we are associated with power, right? And then be mindful of that, and then in our day-to-day life, try to understand how we can change that, right? So violence is part of that, violence against women or other things, because we feel, that we have that power. But my hope with all of this is that we have those discussions where we understand within our own, in the university culture, we are very ideal, we are academic, and then, so how we can make those changes, but then at the same time prepare our students, because when they go out in the real world, I think that's a little different than academia, right? I think there, this systematic masculinity and the power is more corrosive than what we have in academia. So I'm hoping with this group, we can develop things which can help, students when they go out in the real world to overcome some of those things. But the other thing which I felt all my life was that being male, we are also under some pressure because the society looks at us differently, and then since there is a power associated, but then again with that power, we are supposed to be holding certain things. For example, I think we are still there a little bit, but think about financially responsible, right? At some point, men were the breadwinners, right? And right now, I think things have changed, but still, I think there is some association with that. If a man is not working and woman is working, then it is thought it is not good, right? So all those things for me, coming from that background and then observing some of those things here, that was a surprise. And then learning how to, change my own mind thing related to those things, joining this group helped me a lot.
All right, thanks, Irfan. Appreciate your comments. Anyone else that had been involved in any of our programming or anything, want to say any words before we move on? All right. So this next section, we're going to open it up and just have a Q&A with you all as the audience. So, we're kind of open to any questions that you have about our group, maybe some of the other topics that we've discussed as a group. Yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and ask those.
I had one that came in a little bit ago, and I think this might be most appropriate for Melissa. The question was, is MAC open to male identified students?
So MAC is really broken up into two different things right now. There are general trainings and general events that are open up to students, and we are actually looking to involve students a lot more next year in this process. As you know, this year was a bit much. So we just really wanted to succeed with our small group. In terms of our champion cohort, we are looking next year to keep it to professional male identified folks. So students will be involved, but not necessarily as champions quite yet.
Yeah, and this process is really in its early stages still. I think that's what's so exciting, is that it can grow into, a number of things. But yeah, I think right now we're still working on building these early cohorts. I think one of our visions that we've talked about is hoping to have a multitude of layers, right? Like Melissa said, so having a staff and faculty focus, but having also a student only cohort, I think would be awesome. And really we've talked about power dynamics a little bit already today, but just trying to eliminate some of those areas so that students and staff and faculty alike can feel comfortable being honest with each other and coming forward with whatever issues that they're facing, and not having to worry about some of those icky power dynamics, or we're concerned about retribution if some honesty is shared and vulnerability comes forward. Another question that came in, could you talk a little bit about what your session/events looked like? What did you do? Did you have specific topics for discussion each time, etc.?
Yeah, so great question. The administrative team met honestly last year to discuss the different topics that we actually wanted to educate people on. So again, some of our training sessions would focus on bystander intervention. We also did some mental health safety. And then our discussion groups would also take some deeper dives into, what is healthy masculinity, vulnerabilities into, do you feel like you can play a role in preventing sexual violence, stuff like that. And then with this semester, with the cohort, we actually reached out to our champions and we asked them, what are some things that you want to talk about? So yeah, there's definitely a structure, but then there's also a lot of room for flexibility based off of the conversations that we end up having.
I have a follow-up for some of the guys in terms of some of the discussions or some of the trainings and programs that we did for you all. Were there any that like stood out for you? Any ones that really kind of spoke to you personally?
I mean, that's kind of a tough question for me because a lot of the stuff kind of all ran together in different ways. So it was hard to kind of isolate what we're talking about. I mean, the video that you showed us, Jason, I think in one of the last ones, that was incredibly uncomfortable. And, it was just a acted out scenario of like a sexual violence scenario that, was very, difficult to watch and then discuss after the fact. But I think a lot of, in general, a lot of what we discussed, I'll echo some of the stuff that was already said. I mean, I just really liked the ability to get to know folks across campus better was really quite nice. I mean, there wasn't a lot of faculty involvement. I tend to spend more time with faculty and people in my own department, and I'm sure they get sick of talking to me. So it's kind of nice to meet and get to know people in other areas of the world. I encourage more faculty to be involved with this because they are in that role model situation directly every day. And so I think that that was one of my favorite parts about it in general, was this just periodic getting together with this group of guys and getting to know some different people.
I'll echo what Rich said. I think for many of us, for men, this is not a topic when we're sitting around watching a football game or a basketball game on TV that comes up in conversation. So it's good to bring a cross selection of people around campus to listen to each other and their thoughts and their opinions and their backgrounds and all those type of things. So I think overall, just having the opportunity to talk about this topic, which at least in my world, this is not a topic that is brought up many times, unfortunately, among men when you're sitting around discussing life, politics, or anything else. This is usually a topic that most men stay away from in a casual conversation.
I'll just add one thing real quick to what Mike kind of mentioned. I think one of the things with this and just finding this place or being more open to talking about some of these difficult things, I actually find it, maybe some of my friends don't like it, but it's easier for me to talk about difficult things, like other difficult things. I find myself thinking about these issues a little bit more, say talking about, racial, type issues or, other types of social injustices, stuff that you definitely don't talk about in certain settings. I think some of my friends are probably like, I liked Rich when he just talked about fantasy football all the time, but I mean, I find my, I think I've learned more language to try to talk about things a little bit more effectively, and to do it as much as I can in a less confrontational way, learning, like I kind of, it's been mentioned before, just learning the language of kind of how to maybe address some of these issues, because I think that is like the real challenge. I said this to the group when one of our first meetings. I used to work for Pfizer and did pharmaceutical sales, and and I can sell you Lipitor if you want. It took me a while to learn the language of how to do that, and now I think that's one of the hardest things about these difficult to talk about things, is how do you talk about them, and how do you find not what works across the board, because I don't believe in that so much, but what works for you as an individual, and what works for you as an individual in a certain setting, and so I find myself in a lot of different spheres that I'm in, finding ways to discuss these things, whether it's, I do a lot with these pre-healthcare students. So we have discussion groups every other week where, some of the things that we talk about here, I can, find their way into what I choose that we read or discuss there. I find myself mentioning it in, talking about some of these things, even in church council meetings, or in hospital board meetings, or in different, places that are trying to figure out how to, bridge that a little bit better.
Thank you so much, Rich. We had 2 other questions come in, so if it's okay, I'd like to pose those to the group. First question, what conversations have you had about intersectionality as it relates to masculinity and or male identity? And I'll jump in just to begin with on this one, but love to open it up to the rest of the group. I think an important thing for us has been remembering that intersectionality is not just about facets of race and gender. I think sometimes those are usually the first 2 things that we think of when intersectionality comes into the conversation, but something that we've talked about is how things like poverty and masculinity and how those things interact together. I mentioned earlier, as a trans man, I think something that I've liked to bring to the group is talking about power dynamics, and how and like Frank had said in the video, how men can create these narratives, and how patriarchy can control narratives of masculinity and femininity and define what those things are. And how I think something that's always been interesting to me is experiencing life through a lens of seeing sexism, seeing oppression against women, and then having to unfortunately also break that news to female identified folks that yes, you are in fact oppressed, that this is a real thing that you're experiencing, and then at the same time being able to walk through these spaces where I am granted power at times, but then also how quickly that can be taken away when I either out myself as transgender or that's discovered, unfortunately. So I think intersectionality, we need to be talking about this in a multitude of ways. And something that as an admin team, we're also trying to be mindful of is that our core admin team is all white folks. So we do need to acknowledge that and make sure that we are also talking about race and gender in that intersection. And I think that's, like Irfan mentioned before, I think that's something that our champions have brought to the table that has really enriched this group. And something as an admin team, we're really hoping to bring in external speakers and things that can talk on these issues. So that way we aren't only talking about masculinity from a white lens. Anybody else want to jump in on that one?
You said it pretty eloquently. I had nothing to add.
Well, thank you, Melissa. We did have another question come in that I can jump in on if we're okay moving forward with that. Okay. All right, so Rich, you had actually touched on this one quite a bit, but in what ways have the champions been able to talk with other men about these issues, and what has been the response?
Yeah, I think Rich did really nail it on the head. It's not, I didn't do any big meetings and get everybody together, but it is easier for me to talk to other groups of people. This group has given me the knowledge and the comfort level to reach out and realize that people may not realize the issue at hand, and that you can just, by just asking questions, and then listening, you can those are, asking questions and listening is a pretty powerful tool. And when you have some basic understanding of what the issues are, then this group gave me the comfort level to bring it up to my friends in different groups, and even in some of the dining manager meetings, just different general discussions. So, I mean, I think that's the power of this, educating a group of people, and mostly in the format that it's set up, where it's a very casual style of interaction between people discussing a certain topic. It's just made me more aware, and that is transferring into my daily life and the daily life of the operations of auxiliary services.
I think to echo both Rich and Mike, making it easier just to kind of start a conversation, and not shy away from maybe even that opportunity. But I think also for me too, and I brought up to Melissa the other day, I think this group was formed around some of those statistics Melissa shared, and Melissa and Jason getting together and really having a passion for it, and kind of addressing sexual assault, sexual violence. But for me too, I've noticed, especially this year and after the discussions we have with the group and trainings, being more aware of other issues too. And a case in point, if you follow March Madness and the NCAA, the disparity in the weight rooms for the men's tournament and the women's tournament. And maybe your mind doesn't go straight to sexual violence when they're showing pictures of squat racks or a lack of squat racks, but it's like, for me, it really, that caught my attention more, I think, than maybe it would have in the past. Had it been last year, 2 years ago, I'd be like, oh yeah, well, that doesn't seem right. Where this year is kind of like, no, there's something more to that. Why is there such disparity there? And so I've appreciated that, and even then just having conversations with my partner and other colleagues about, again, that just as a kind of more recent example, as that's been in the news, in the past week or two, but just helping to be that more at the forefront of my mind. And I've appreciated that I recognize that more.
I just wanted to take the time to verbalize what Jen just put in the chat. So all of that contributes to the thought that women are less than and can be treated as such, leading to sexual violence. Thanks for the share, Adam. So I think that was really important. Thank you, Jen.
I think something that's been really cool for me to see just from our small cohort is the conversations around fatherhood and masculinity. I don't have kids of my own, but I think something I've just observed that's been really cool is how fathers in the group have been talking and sharing ideas and how they have conversations with their kids, or especially if they have daughters, what some of those interactions have looked like, and just ways that they've maybe stepped up a little bit more, or just changed how they talk about certain things. I think has just been a really cool point of growth that I've seen within this group that, I personally can't really contribute much to, right? I don't have kids. I can't speak to what that experience is like, but it has been really rewarding to see, like Mike had said, it is a casual setting. It is us having discussions, but then also just pulling from each other's experiences and expertise in different ways, and what has worked, maybe what hasn't, and how to initiate some of those conversations.
I could be wrong. I think one of the things that Caden mentioned in the question, or maybe it was Jason who asked the question, I can't remember, but like, how has it gone when you've talked or brought this up in different settings? And variably, I mean, it's, you know, I mean, there's sometimes like when I'm talking with students where I do feel like it's kind of led to further discussion, and we've, you know, dug in a little deeper on stuff. There's other times where I've said certain things where I've seen people, you know, get visibly, you know, frustrated by a comment that I might make, you know, just not wanting to hear that in some ways, or digging their heels in about certain things. Not nobody's taking a swing at me or anything like that, you know, but it's just kind of and you know, an awkwardness that can occur. So, but I think a lot of the stuff, especially with students, it's you know, the places where I've, you know, said things that are not addressed some less than easy to talk about kind of issues. I think it's gone okay.
I really appreciate that answer, because I think it is important to remember that, like, it's not going to be 2 + 2 = 4 every time. It's not always going to be like, I talked about it and I changed the world. But I love your willingness to just try. And sometimes it's really successful and sometimes it's not, but just keep on trying. So I love that.
Yeah, in terms of my experience, I feel fortunate because I have the privilege of really having, you know, some very deep conversations sometimes with students on an individual level with counseling. And even before our group started, I've noticed, just me personally, with some of the sessions that I've been having with male identified folks and just male identified folks seeking counseling over the last few years, it seems like more and more male identified students have been coming in and talking about how much of a burden, how much having to, you know, either suppress their emotions or not have that support or a place to talk about, you know, some of that, how much that has impacted their mental health. Again, for me, that is just really reinforcing how important this work is, you know, whether it's men advocating for change or, you know, other things that can help support this work and provide that space for men who, you know, there's a lot of them out there that really, I think, really are looking for this and really want this. And you know, to take it back to mental health, as we've all seen, especially, not that mental health has, you know, not been an issue prior to the pandemic, but just how much this has highlighted, you know, how much mental health impacts us all. And I think moving forward, that I hope is an area that we continue to really focus on with our group. And just, you know, I'm excited to take that, you know, eventually take that next step of starting to involve students more and providing and starting to create that space for them. Because, yeah, you know, like I said, just in my interactions with male identified folks coming in for counseling, there's men on campus that, you know, especially our students, that really are looking for a place and really, you know, I think are appreciative when they have a space when they can finally, you know, start talking about some of this stuff that's really, really, you know, had a huge impact on them for a lot of their life.
I think just to quickly build off of what you said, Jason, too, thanks for sharing that. I think even for our group, our champions and the administrative team, I've noticed, you know, when we have a discussion topic during one of our discussion times or whatnot, it's never pulling teeth to get people to chat. Sometimes there might be a moment where you can tell everyone's processing. As Jason shared, a video one week, or we've posed different discussion topics, but we fill our discussion time, and I think that's been an awesome thing that we've noticed is that platform that we're able to get together and have these conversations. And I appreciate Jason adding that component of our male identifying students too are kind of longing for that, and appreciate when people kind of brought up how our students going to be part of this hopefully in the future, and that's definitely something I think at the forefront of our mind, and we'll be working on. But yeah, I think just it's so important, and I think we discover that more and more, it seems, each year, kind of just that mental health aspect too, and having that chance to talk.
I had a private comment come in that I'd like to share, just some feedback for the group, but also just something that I think would be really good for all of us to consider and sit on. The comment was, I understand some of the cohort bringing up relationships to women, such as doing this for their daughters, wives, moms, etc. However, women are people on their own. I'd like to encourage also reminding ourselves how important it is that we are also good role models for our sons, fathers, peers, etc. It feels like folks are leaning into relationships to women as to why they are engaged in this work, and I'd like to offer that reframe if it feels appropriate. I really appreciated that comment, because I think that is, when we talk about violence against women, right, I often hear that's those sentiments of, well, that could be your mom, that could be your aunt, that could be your wife, but at the same time, we do need to recognize and uphold the autonomy of women and understand that these issues are important because women are people, not just because we have a relationship to them, right? So I really appreciate that comment and that feedback, and I definitely think that's something that we need to hold on to for future endeavors.
When you mentioned, I'm one of those guys that has kids, and probably shared a little bit about the parenting piece, and while I have two daughters, I do think about that, but in a lot of my thinking in those parts of our discussion, I was thinking a lot more about my son, and just being the appropriate kind of role model in many ways. Ray Pugh, as you guys they're part of it, remember, I mean, he's great at bringing in like movie stuff, and and just like we were talking about, like that the male role model in movie, kind of the machoism piece, and that and how there's so much of that that's being thrown at young men these days, just trying to figure out how to be a more be a better role model for men, I think was something that I really thought a lot about from our discussions.
Well, I appreciate we have about 15 minutes left, and I want to be mindful of folks' time. Were there any other comments, feedback, or questions that anyone had for us?
Yeah, and even outside of this presentation, we're always welcoming feedback. This is a work in progress. All the men involved, we are all work in progresses too. And I think anytime that we can get feedback or suggestions and things like that from other people across campus, that's a really valuable piece of it. So I appreciate everyone that has sent in a comment or has asked a question for this session, but don't let that stop you in terms of if you have ongoing feedback or if you have ongoing questions. So all right, so yeah, in terms of moving on, in the interest of time, I'm going to hand it over to Adam, and he is going to close things out for today.
quick intervention. So sorry. We did actually just had 2 questions come in. Is it okay if we take time for those real fast?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, first one is, so looking at the national trends of violence and white men appearing as oppressors in mass shootings, etc. I'm curious as to whether your group has discussed this topic and how this men advocating for change relates to this group.
Well, it's funny. So Kaden is actually going to be leading the group in that discussion tomorrow. That is actually the theme of our discussion group. So yes, we do often talk about real world things and what's kind of happening within the current events. But yeah, I think the champions will really enjoy the discussion tomorrow for that reason.
Yeah, and I think unfortunately we really, I mean, especially this week and last week, we're seeing an intersection of racism and misogyny, and specifically acts of white terrorism is what we're seeing, and predominantly committed by men. So very, very important topics to be talking about. And it's difficult, right? Because I think oftentimes when these events happen, they're marketed as lone wolf attacks or you know, and especially the incident last week that happened in Atlanta, you know, the sheriff coming out and saying that that person was having a bad day and, oh, it was because he has a sex addiction. All of those things are just distracting factors, right? And these are things that are minimizing the weight of the issue. And also, I think, painting a humanitarian view of a murderer, somebody who committed a very terrible act. And so definitely a really crucial topic that we need to be talking about more. And I'm looking forward to having that discussion with our group tomorrow. But, you know, I think what's important too is not only that we have these conversations within this cohort, but also within our interpersonal circles too, right? Because, you know, as much as I love this cohort and I am so proud of them, this small group also cannot be the only ones having these conversations about violence and its connection to masculinity. So very, very great point though. Other question that came in was, have any of the champions experienced any pushback from other men? I think I'll touch on this a little bit, but something that I feel like we maybe haven't verbalized out loud yet is a piece in this group related to accountability, right? I think that's something that's been really great about this group is we have had moments where something has been verbalized that maybe other folks disagreed with, or someone thought a situation could have been handled better. And I think something that has been, that I didn't expect, was people taking that feedback with grace. And so I think that's something that has been, I think I don't know how this exactly happened, but this initial cohort, it feels like so many people in this initial group were in a place of growing and learning. And I think that really worked to our benefit. Outside of that, however, I will say definitely have had some pushback. There, in a variety of ways, there have been friends of mine that have made comments, misogynistic comments, or things that were incredibly problematic. And although I felt empowered through conversations with this group to interact and intervene in those moments, they haven't always been met with success, right? There has been pushback. There has been this, oh, well, you don't know what it's like, or, you know, and I unfortunately also have that piece as a trans person where I have that default of like, you know, sometimes I get thrown these comments that you weren't born male, so how would you know? And so I think for in a lot of ways things are discredited, right? Oftentimes when you are trying to speak truth to power, and that is a setback, of course. But so, and like Melissa said, it's not all roses, right? Not all conversations lead where we want them to go. But I think what has been important is not feeling afraid to speak out regardless, knowing that other people have similar passions, do understand that there are problems in this area and that we do need to step forward even when it's uncomfortable. I would argue, especially when it's uncomfortable. Anyone else want to speak to that?
Yeah, I can kind of go a little bit off of that, Kaden. And for me, like what I experience or what I see a lot of is resorting to those, those buzzwords like cancel culture or indoctrination or anything like that. And, for me, it's like, cancel culture that, right now it's people are getting held accountable, it's and they should be, because for so long, people have, especially men, have gotten away with a lot of crap. And so whenever I see the cancel culture thing, or if somebody brings that up, for me, it's like, no, this is accountability. This is, people getting called out for their stuff. And, and when we start, throwing cancel culture or some of those other terms out, we're hiding behind our privilege.
I haven't had any other questions come in. So Adam, if you'd like to lead us in closing, I think it would be a good time for that. We've got about 6 minutes left.
Yeah. So as Melissa put in the chat and Jason articulated as well, we MAC is still growing, and we always appreciate that feedback. And one of the things we thought would be a great opportunity to bring in this presentation, is topic ideas or theme ideas for next year. This year we kind of went with that, what's your one thing, where every champion was able to kind of articulate one thing that they wanted to be able to do this year. And that was great for our poster campaign and a great way to kick it off. But also wanted to kind of recognize that there's a lot of great minds and great individuals on the screen. And so we wanted to take a moment to open it up. If anyone here had any ideas as we continue to look forward and plan for next year, of any ideas for kind of those themes or topics that we could start to run with.
Adam, maybe I can say something?
Absolutely.
Even though I think, Jason mentioned cancel culture and all that. I often think, in last few years, we also have this, word coming up, culture wars, right? Culture wars. So I think what we are talking about also fit in within that dynamic, right? Because within the culture war, we are losing men in some sense of that power, dynamic we had. And then I think some of those shootings, some of those things might indicate some of those things. So maybe that's something we need to talk about.
Yeah. Absolutely, thank you. I'll say too, as being conscious of our time, if you're later tonight or even later this week or later on, have an idea or whatnot, please don't hesitate to reach out to any of the champions or the administrative team and pass that feedback or those ideas along too. Again, just reiterating, as Melissa, Jason, I think kind of everyone has said, we appreciate that feedback and that opportunity to engage in conversation. Melissa also put in the group chat if you'd like to nominate an individual for them to be a MAC champion or in part of the cohort, or to self-nominate. You can email her. Her email is listed in the chat, stonerm@uwplatt.edu. Yeah, I believe then she'll connect with you and has a little questionnaire that the administrative team and Melissa have worked hard on putting together. And so we're excited to start that process. It's March, but as we do so much in higher education, we're always thinking ahead to next year and getting ready for all of that. So I think with that, then we just kind of wanted to open the floor too for any closing thoughts from our champions, the administrative team, or anyone else.
That was the first time that I actually saw that video of ours, and I'm and I was watching myself and listening to myself, but it was I think one of the points that I made, to quote myself. I think it's something I think a lot about, which is that like change, like that we're kind of working towards. It kind of starts small, right? And it starts with that the small interactions that can maybe grow when they take hold in some fashion, and so I've enjoyed, if that's the right word, I don't know, but just I like meeting new people and talking to people and having smaller conversations. And I think in doing that, I developed the confidence to be able to have more conversations too. So hopefully it'll become something when, I don't know, 40 years from now. So.
Thank you, Rich.
Well, thank you all for the presentation. Thank you to the MAC group and all of the participants who are here today. We hope that you continue to engage with the MCIC series, and I know that we are just about at time, so enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you so much.